a sweet potato infused bourbon with a homemade sweet potato syrup to make a sweet potato old-fashioned. Cheers. It is just, I just don't know how to describe this. Let's go back 5 days and start from the beginning. In episode 3 of Netflix's Waffles and Mochi, we learn about the awesome power of the potato. This humble ingredient can not only propel Waffles, Mochi, and occasionally Matt Damon through space, but it also has a wealth of flavor to give to not only our culinary dishes, but to our cocktails. While the potato is often the base ingredient for most vodkas, I didn't want to do something quite so obvious. So we're actually going to use a sweet potato, infuse some bourbon, and make a sweet potato syrup to make a sweet potato old-fashioned. But enough talk about it. Let's get both in the kitchen and the bar and get this thing started.
Listen to your vegetables and eat your parents with waffles and mochi. Potato!
Welcome to my kitchen. So to make the sweet potato old-fashioned, we're gonna need to prep 2 items in advance. One, we need to infuse the bourbon that we're going to use with sweet potato. I was able to find a beautiful sweet potato at my local market. We wanna make sure we get as much dirt off of that as possible so that we taste the flavor of the potato and not the flavor of the ground that it grew in. We're gonna use both potato peel and chunks of the potato itself. And finally, we'll add the bourbon. I'm using Old Tub Unfiltered for this project. This is a pre-prohibition style. I've added about 8 ounces of bourbon to the jar. It should go really, really well with the sweet potato. I'm gonna add 2 small cinnamon sticks to my bourbon sweet potato mixture. Now I'm gonna seal that off and store that in a cool, dark place for about 5 days. Give the jar a good shake a couple of times every day or 2. This is gonna just make sure that all of the flavors incorporate in throughout the bourbon rather than settling at the bottom. The other item we need to prepare for is our sweet potato syrup. For the sweet potato syrup, we're gonna use 4 ounces of a sweet potato and roast that for about 30 to 45 minutes. I'm gonna use a fork and pierce this potato several times. I'm not gonna oil my potato, but I am gonna add just a pinch of kosher salt. This is just to enhance the flavor. And then we're gonna place this potato in a 375-degree oven for about 30 to 35 minutes. Just waiting on you, Max. Thank you. My sweet potato is out of the oven. So now I'm gonna combine my sweet potato, 200 grams of water, and 100 grams of maple syrup into a pot and let those cook down a bit. After 10 minutes on the stove, it's time to put the entire mixture in a blender and puree it all together. As always, please be very careful when using hot liquids in a blender. And finally, we're gonna strain this mixture into a clean bottle for easy storage. It is absolutely delicious. I cannot wait to mix this with our sweet potato infused bourbon for our sweet potato old-fashioned. We'll see you in a few days. So my sweet potato bourbon has been sitting for 5 days. It's taken on some great aromas. But now we need to get it out of the potatoes and into our cocktail. So we're gonna strain this through a funnel and coffee filter into a glass container so that we can separate that delicious bourbon from the starchy potato. So let's go ahead and make this drink. Add fresh cracked ice to a mixing glass and add 2.5 ounces of sweet potato infused bourbon. Add half an ounce of sweet potato syrup, followed by 2 dashes of Peychaud's bitters. Stir over ice for about 10 seconds and strain into a double rocks glass with a large ice cube. Top it off with a garnish of a cocktail cherry. Make that 2 cocktail cherries. And there we have it, the sweet potato old-fashioned. Cheers. This is unlike any cocktail I've ever made before. The taste of sweet potato mixed with the bourbon reminds me of a sweet potato pie. Imagine that you're sitting at the dinner table at Thanksgiving and Uncle Larry and Uncle Peter are getting into it about politics. Room is tense, everybody's a little uncomfortable, but your pie is really, really good, so you don't want to leave. At the heat of the argument, Uncle Larry, who's had a few too many already, grabs his bourbon, throws it in Uncle Peter's face, but misses Uncle Peter, and it lands right in your pie.
Mochi, sorry, but...
The pie is really, really good. And you've had that bourbon before. You know that's good too. You can't let these items go to waste. What do? You enjoy. This is taking an old fashioned and putting a flavor that does not belong in it. And that's what's weird. Again, it's not that it doesn't taste good. It really does. It's just that Polly shouldn't be.
Polly shouldn't be!
Because these flavors are not flavors that I expect. I do get just the subtlest of note of cherry from the Peychaud's bitters, and then of course the cherries that I've added as garnish. It really just adds a very, very subtle element. It's actually quite enjoyable. I think if I'm making sweet potato pie in the future, I will add a little bit of cherry to it because it's a really interesting flavor combination that goes really well. So while this is definitely one of the most mind-scratching things I've ever made, I do really enjoy it, and I hope you do too. So cheers to you, and in the spirit of Waffles of Mochi, thanks, Obama. That is so